Junkie Nation, what's going on? Gorgeous George and Goze are back with Jeremy Kennedy, title challenger on
Yes, sir.
March 22nd out in Northern Ireland, Belfast to be exact. He challenges the great Patricio Pitbull Freire for his Bellator featherweight title. What's going on, Jeremy?
Not a lot, man. Just it's excited to be doing this finally now, so it's good.
Is it worth the wait?
I mean, not during the wait, it was not, but now that it's here and it all worked out, it definitely was worth the wait.
Did you get better in between the time you weren't fighting, which is, I guess, a lot of times we want you guys fighting all the time, staying active, but we know that a lot of times your best improvements come from that time off.
Yeah, I mean, like that's probably one of the bigger benefits was not fighting, but still training. Like I thought I was going to be getting that fight. It was right around the corner every time. It was going to be right after he dropped down to 35. Regardless, he was going to be coming up to defend. So I was training for that. Then the short notice thing in Japan happened. So then they were going to move it around, do an interim title or something like that near the end of the year. So I was training for that. And then when that all fell through in the sale, the buy, everything, I was still staying hopeful training because I knew that shows were going to get back up and going again in like January, February is what I thought. So I was training all the way through the holidays. And then I got news like literally right after Christmas for Belfast. And it was after, the champ versus champ thing had been announced. So I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Just circumstances just kept happening that were out of my control. So I just wanted to move on. I wanted to get a fight in, and it was still, a number one contender fight. It was still a billing. It was going to just have me fight again, and I had to get my job done. And then I was still going to get that same opportunity just later on in the year. And so it just kept me training the whole year through. My main training partner, Kai Kamaka, he was booked like 3 or 4 times all last year. So I was just doing back-to-back camps with him constantly. That was keeping me motivated, keeping me in the gym, keeping me learning and studying different opponents. We were, looking at Ahmed Magomedov. Then we were looking at Corrales. So we just had different bodies, Adley Edwards. So he had a bunch of different guys, and I was helping him all along through those while waiting for my opportunity. So it just kept me in the gym, kept me learning. And yeah. And then when I got this switch, I'd already been in camp, and I've spent a year training for Pitbull. So, I mean, there wasn't a crazy big transition. It just went back to my roots of what the game plan was all year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy the way this sport unfolds. He had possibly Jesus Pinedo ahead of him.
Yep.
And then that fell through. We know that at the same time, Aaron Pico was making a run at trying to be a title challenger.
Yeah.
Although the timing of his fight may have helped you, basically because he just fought, I guess.
Yeah.
And so you being available, you having a win over him, you having a win streak, like it worked out. It took a while, but it looks like it worked out.
Yeah, exactly.
You get them in Northern Ireland for the title. Do you care about locations? Like it's not in Brazil, so you're not in enemy territory, but it's also not in the States. It's like just in another part of the world. Is that cool for you to pull away from family and distractions for a week and go work, or is that stressful for you? What's that like?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been like the story of my career. Essentially, I've been fighting guys in their hometown, and Belfast was going to be no different. I was fighting Gallagher originally, so it was going to be a hometown crowd thing. Fought Volk in Australia, Honey Jason in Brazil. Just that seems like I've always been on the road. And so I think the only time I was fighting like locally was when I was in the PFL tournament, and I was living out here in Vegas, and they were within the US. That was like a full year of domestic shows, but other than that, I've been traveling overseas for my fights for as long as I can remember. So it's kind of natural for me. I know what to pack, I know what to bring, I know what to expect on the other side, or what not to expect, I guess. It's just a little bit harder with the travel, now that I have a baby as well, and I like to bring the family along and everything. So little things are changing, but again, I would have fought him in Brazil. It's just pretty random that I'm fighting him in Ireland now. I was anticipating States or Brazil ideally, but I don't care. I like the hometown. I like being spoiler. This one's just going to be different because now I'm spoiler to the champ, not necessarily in his backyard, but still, it doesn't matter. It's I'm going there to upset some people and win this belt.
We just spoke to him, and he says the numbers don't lie. He pretty much thinks he is the best fighter ever in Bellator history. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, again, you can't really fault him. Numbers don't lie. You know, that's a resume he's spent a decade or more, you know, putting together. So to me, to try to like diminish that just doesn't even make sense. You know, he is for sure the record holder. You know, when you think about Bellator, especially Bellator featherweights, that's Pitbull. You know, that's who I've watched from the beginning, and I've always kind of had my eye on. Just even when I was in the UFC and out of Bellator and looking at Bellator's always had a good 45 division. You know, the Emmanuel Sanchez's, the Daniel Weichels, like all those guys coming up. I was always watching, and I thought I matched up great with them. And so when I made the transition over, I couldn't wait to get my feet wet with all those kind of guys, you know. And Sanchez was one of them, a guy that I watched well beyond when being on my radar. I thought I matched up well, and now Pitbull was another one. He was the champ forever, and I always just thought, you know, he's a little undersized, but somehow he just made it work time and time again. And I didn't think that would be the case facing me, and now I get to finally go prove that.
I asked him if he thought he was past his prime because, you know, this is the first time he's ever lost 2 in a row.
Yeah.
And he's coming off the 2 fights in a row. He says he didn't really answer directly, but he says he can't wait to prove people that he's not. What would you say? I mean, he's a little higher in age, a lot of wear and tear. You know, that means a lot of training camps, a lot of weight loss, a lot of travel. What would you say about that? Do you I'm sure you're training for the best, Pitbull, but you know, our eyes don't deceive us either.
Yeah, I mean, I'm exactly like you said it. I'm training like I'm fighting the best Pitbull. You know, I have to. That's the way I approach every fight. And it's hard because there is a lot of little speculations around those losses. You know, he hasn't lost at 145. You know, so he's still, in my eyes, he's that undisputed, that multi-time champion. 145. You know, like who's beat him at 45? So he had the 35 loss and then that short notice thing in Japan, which again, there's a lot of like that was short notice, quick after losing all that weight to fight up a weight class. So I'm not even making excuses for him. It is what it is. I can't go off of all this guy's losses last 2 because, you know, there's different weight classes. He's going down. He's not the faster guy down at 35. And we saw that. And I picked up a lot of things there that I saw holes. And then the Japan thing, I mean, what can you really gauge off of 2 minutes of whatever, you know, on a 3-day notice fight? So I'm fighting the multi-defending champion 145 Pitbull, and age, there's that 35 rule thing going around. And I mean, he was still winning at 35. His last couple wins, I think Borix and Kleber, he was both 35 there. So I mean, I don't think his age, that was only a year and a half ago. So that doesn't really put too much weight on it. I mean, for me, I think the biggest thing that sticks out to me was that cut to 35, not his age, not the wear and tear, just the frame, the size, the fact that he could even make that weight. I just know I'm a bigger human than him. I just know I'm a lot more physical of featherweight than he is, because I couldn't even dream about making 140, you know? So the fact that he could and did, and not even that long ago, like within a year, I don't think he's going to be able to put on the muscle properly to even compare with me physically, you know? So I think that's the biggest one I'm taking away, is I just think he's going to be too small. But again, he has fought his whole career as a pretty undersized featherweight, so he's made it work. But I just plan on what I've always thought, you know, he's a little undersized, and I plan on showing that by just being too physical and too dominant everywhere.
Jeremy, what was it like when you hung up the phone after you got the news? Who was the first couple people you told, and what were just the emotions that went through you?
No, I'm kind of a nerd, but it's funny. Yeah, it was super late at night because it was the time change. It was early morning weigh-ins over there in Saudi. So I woke up, got the FaceTime, woke my wife up, shook her. She was still asleep. She's like, all she said was like, "Oh, cool." Fell back asleep, so she didn't even really process it, and I didn't get what I wanted from her. So I called my parents because they were coming out to Belfast already to explain, you know, the big change up. They're pretty involved in my career, and they spent all last year, you know, waiting for me to be announced against Pitbull. So then to get to call them and tell them, hey, it's not the Gallagher, and we are going. You're already booked. Everything's happening, and it is Pitbull. So in 4 weeks. So they were ecstatic, and man, I couldn't go back to sleep. So I was just fired up, and it was good, man. Yeah, I can't even describe it. It took like probably 2 or 3 days to actually sink in that I was not fighting Gallagher and I was fighting Pitbull, and to start shifting that focus to him. But I was just on cloud 9. It was crazy.
And like we mentioned, I think before the interview, it feels like this has just been something that's been up in the air for years.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that, when you had different opponents in between, you were probably training for the champion, thinking I'm going to be there any second.
Yeah.
How much has changed from the first time you kind of set a plan towards how you would fight Pitbull to what it's like now? Has it been very different, or
a little bit different? More so just because I've noticed his style change a little bit, not in a sense of like he's lost a step. He approaches them differently. He's not too much of an aggressive, get in your face, get the punches in. He's a lot more technical, fights a little safer now, good distance control, and a big counter puncher. So for a guy that size to be a really good counter puncher is tricky. You got to approach a fight properly, and a lot of the times he catches these guys who are just trying to rush in and fight him like a bull is when he gets those counters. So, and then again, my style, I kind of get right in your face, from the first bell. So I've approached it. I'm looking at things a little differently. 5 rounds. He knows how to fight 5 rounds really well. He's done it his whole career. I've only ever done it once, and that was regional scene, and so it is a different beast. So I'm approaching things a little differently, more methodical, more technical. And I think it's going to allow me to show my full game, rather than, as soon as I get my hands on a guy, typically that's a wrap. They're not getting back up, and I'm controlling them and I'm beating them up and whatever. And now this one is not necessarily a fight that I can just go out there, grab a hold of him, dump him on his head, and then have my way with him. It's something I'm gonna have to be methodical about and chop him down and get to show, my striking, everything from the feet to the floor, and within 5 rounds too. There's nobody can go out there and redline for five rounds, hard grappling right out the gate. So I know he's expecting me to be jumping on him right away, and he's going to be defending takedowns all night, but I don't think that's going to be the case.
For the longest time when we interview you, it's always been around Bellator fighters. And now it's like we have this new pool of PFL guys. Is there and this isn't to say you're not focused on what's ahead of you, but is there a little bit of a PFL hit list? I mean, they have a lot of great fighters at your weight class. It just seems so much fun when we match your name up against some of these guys. Are there any that stand out that would you rather just stick to fighting Bellator guys, or can you not wait till you get into the PFL guys?
Yeah, I definitely want to. I really like that cross promotion kind of, PFL versus Bellator versus Ryzen. Like I was always trying to get on those Japanese cards, but this is another opportunity. I want that belt. I want that little ring. So Pinedo, whoever's the champ, really got my eye, just because they're the best guy on the other side. So Bellator though, like I want to win this belt, and I want to defend it, and I want to be a long lasting champ. I want to replace Pitbull in that sense of being the guy at 145. And but that entices me, the cross promotion. There's a lot of good names, and more so a lot of fresh names. Bellator's division, I've been studying and looking at these guys and fighting all of them. And now the fact that there's a whole new list of guys with all just as good of credentials and big of name value and everything, it just opens the door wide open that I want to fight all of them, everybody. And just to see where I match up with and build my resume. And I want those names on my record. But it all starts with Pitbull, because that's what's going to give me these opportunities. And that's the biggest name I want anyways. If that one right there, winning the title against the longest defending champion, and I don't think there's been another 45 champ in Bellator since the beginning. So, I don't know, but for as long as I can remember, it's been him. So to be able to be the one to dethrone him at 145, yes, he's lost at 35 and 55, but to be that guy that beats him in his weight class, it's going to be special, man.
It was McKee before Pitbull, but yeah.
But yeah, for that real quick switch. Yeah.
Yeah. They're 1-1, but McKee's at 55. I'd love to see a year where you fight Pitbull, Pinedo, and Pico. That'd be one hell of a 2024.
That would be that would be a big year, definitely. And exactly, like on the Bellator side, there's still options. There's Pico's got to be fighting. He's right there next in line too. It was me and him neck and neck getting this title shot and timing and whatnot. And I was worried that Saudi, he was on the card and that something might have happened there, and I was already booked. But they wanted to keep the PFL Bellator thing going, which worked in my favor. And then timing worked for once for me. It was like that was the logical step. All year when I was waiting for Pitbull, it always seemed like, it was a kind of a stretch, and how can I, contest him going down to challenge for a third belt? And it's like, oh no, you should fight me instead. Like, no, that realistically, if I'm being a smart, like Bellator eyes, that's the fight you want to put together. And then finally, this is the one that was for me. Like, this is the fight that made sense. Pitbull wanted to fight again. Bellator, they wanted 2 title fights every card. They got it now. I was the number 1 contender. I've got my title shot. Pitbull's got his fight, and it works out great. And after I get this belt, who knows what happens next? And there's a lot of options.
Is it tough when a fight, not that it's late notice, like a week, but still an international fight? Well, then again, you were already scheduled to fight Gallagher, so never mind. I was just going to say, was it hard to put together everything, that you would want? You want the most ideal situation when you fight for a title. So did you get that?
I mean, as best as I could. Getting the fight in general, like I would have fought in Saudi. If they would have called me and said, hey, you need to be there this weekend, I would have done it. But this is probably one of the best circumstances outside of actually just getting the fight booked originally, full 8-week camp, whatever. I mean, I'm already fighting. I already have my flights booked. Everything's settled for Ireland. And it was 4 weeks. And the only difference was opponent, who I've already been training and game planning with all my coaches for a year,
right,
or longer. And then 5 rounds instead of 3, which cardio has always been one of those things I rely on anyway. So it was just upping that. And I had a month to do that, is to make those little adjustments from a 3-round fight to a 5-round fight. I wouldn't say little, like that's tough. That's a lot of work, but making that adjustment. And then again, with Pitbull, I've had a game plan with all my boxing coach, my kickboxing coach, my head, Eric, everybody. Like, we already have our own little routes and game plan for him that we've worked all year. So it's just a matter of forgetting what we were doing with Gallagher and going back to what we've been working on for Pitbull. So again, just Julian, my teammate, fights the same night. So in a perfect world, I could have my whole team there, but I'm kind of limited on who I'm bringing out there with me. But that would have been against Gallagher. That would have been against Pitbull. That would have been against anybody. Just fighting on that date is just on the, across the ocean is just never easy. And that nothing's going to work out perfectly. And I'm sure Pitbull's got the same thing. He was just in Saudi Arabia and he just made weight, and he had fight week already. And now he's had to travel back home. There's jet lag, and now he's got to go back out there again. And he's going to have another jet lag or whatever. He's going to lose a week of fight week. So there's tons of things that I can worry about myself about things not going right, but nothing is always going to be perfect. And I just control every little thing that I possibly can. And it makes everything easier.
You really follow the sport pretty well, man. You kind of know a lot about events, the fighters, where they're at. That's pretty cool. Would you ever want to be behind a mic in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a nerd when it comes to MMA, and I follow, especially at 45, I follow everything. And that's why all along throughout that PFL thing, I had to focus on my fight. But, Pinedo's dropping out, Braga's coming in, Loughnane might have jumped in at 55. There's Pico on the table, Corrales is flying. Like, I was following along on all of that, and so for it to work out for me was great. And it just pays off to be paying attention to all these little things, and everybody in my division, from the PFL brackets to Bellator guys and all the guys going over there. But to answer your question, I mean, yeah, I think after fighting, I'm still going to be so invested into fighting just because it's my entire life. And I like both sides of it. I like even the fan side of it, like staying back in the matchups of not including me, but other people, different promotions, everything like that is interesting to me. So definitely probably transition to that in one little piece. I don't know if people want to listen to me talk, but yeah, some part of me will definitely be involved in that kind of behind the scenes MMA stuff when I'm done.
your voice sounds like Tom Brady. I don't know if anyone's ever told you that.
Oh,
You
oh,
kind of
no,
sound like
that's
him a
not
little
it.
bit. You
Okay.
smile like Sam Alvey. You know, you always
Okay.
have a smile on your face. You sound kind of like Tom Brady. But I'll tell you why I told you this, because one time Michael Chiesa came to the studio. We were talking about his weight class. He was a lightweight at the time. It was like maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I had a friend. We had a friend. Remember John Stelfragos
Yeah.
from Fox Sports, and he would listen to our show. And a lot of times he gave tryouts to fighters based on hearing them come into the studio and co-host with us for 2 hours because of the way they would answer callers and break down. And he knew exactly what was going on in his division before the show was even over.
Yeah.
I just go, "Hey, how you doing?" He goes, "I know exactly what you're going to tell me." And he brought him in for a tryout. He did well. This was the mullet guy back in the day. Now you see him, working the desk there with ESPN, but it kind of almost reminds me of that. Hopefully that's something you explore. I think you'd be really, really good at it.
I appreciate that, and thank you.
Mm-hmm. But first things first, the 22nd of March out in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Best of luck with that fight, the training camp, the weight loss, the travels. I know it's a long time coming. You deserve it, and we see it a lot at Extreme Couture. You're always in there grinding, so we hope the best for you against the great Pitbull too. It's one thing to win the title, but when you can take it off a legend, man, that even elevates you even more. And I'm sure you know this because again, you follow the sport. That's how big this fight is.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I really appreciate it. It feels like we've been talking about this for a long time, especially with you guys. Every time I come on, and now here it is. So it's time to go seize the opportunity. It's one thing getting the opportunity, but now it was a bit of a parade when I first got it. Everyone's congratulating me, but I'm like, it's congratulate me after the fight. I got the opportunity, but I need to capitalize on it, and that's where all my focus is right now.
Right on, Jeremy. Thanks for the time.
Oh, man.
We'll talk to you soon,
Thank you.
and we'll definitely see you around at the gym, no matter what.
Definitely.